They said Elias Rowe was invisible, the kind of man you pass every day and never remember. A night janitor at the county hospital, soft-spoken, always early, always polite. And for years, that's exactly how the most powerful man in town wanted him, because invisibility can be useful, especially when someone is hiding something. Elias grew up on the wrong side of the river, the side with boarded windows and sirens instead of streetlights. His mother died waiting for treatment she couldn't afford. His sister followed years later, caught in the gears of a system that promised care and delivered silence. Elias learned early that pain could be ignored if it belonged to the poor, and he never forgot who was in charge when it happened. Dr. Victor Hale, Chief of Medicine, hospital board member, local hero, the man whose face smiled from billboards and charity galas, the man who shook hands with politicians while patients begged behind closed doors. Elias scrubbed the floors beneath Hale's office every night. He heard things, arguments, hushed conversations, words like trial, denial, liability. He saw charts disappear, files shredded, names crossed out. Once, Elias tried to speak up. He told a supervisor that patient records were being altered, that people were dying after being pushed into experimental treatments without consent. The response was swift and cold. He was laughed at, written up, threatened with termination. And then Dr. Hale himself intervened. "You should be grateful you have a job," Hale told him, smiling. "People like you don't get second chances." From that moment on, Elias understood the truth. Justice wasn't blind, it just refused to look down. What no one noticed was that Elias stopped complaining, stopped asking questions, and started listening. For months, he documented everything: dates, names, patterns, patients admitted with minor conditions, patients enrolled into special programs, patients who never came home. Elias told himself he was gathering proof that one day the truth would matter. But truth doesn't move fast when power stands in the way. Then, castmate Lily Mercer, 17 years old, no insurance. She reminded Elias of his sister. Same nervous smile, same apologetic tone for existing. Lily was transferred to Hale's private research wing. 3 days later, she was pronounced dead. Complications. Elias watched her mother collapse in the hallway. That night, something inside him shifted. He stopped believing the system could be fixed and started believing he had been chosen to stop the suffering. Elias didn't see himself as a killer. He saw himself as a gatekeeper. The first was a man already dying, a patient Hale had used and discarded. Elias tampered with the machine. Just enough. No alarms, no struggle. The death was ruled natural. Elias told himself it was mercy. Then came another, and another, all connected, all complicit. Doctors who signed papers without reading, administrators who cashed bonuses while families planned funerals. Each time, Elias whispered the same words: "You won't hurt anyone else." The irony was cruel. The hospital praised him for his dedication. Dr. Hale nodded at him in passing, never once remembering his name. But power has a scent, and secrets rot. A young investigative reporter named Mara Klein began asking questions. Death rates, missing files, patterns no one wanted to see. Dr. Hale panicked. He ordered an internal review, quietly, and for the first time, Elias noticed security watching him. That was when Elias made his mistake. He left a folder where it could be found, not by accident. Inside were copies of everything: records, recordings, proof of Hale's crimes, and one final note: "You taught me that the poor are invisible. You were wrong." The night Dr. Hale confronted Elias, the hospital was silent, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath. "You think you're a hero?" Hale sneered. "You're a janitor. You don't decide who lives or dies." Elias looked at him calmly. "No," he said. "You did. I just ended the program." Hale reached for the phone. He never finished. When the police arrived, they found Dr. Victor, Hale dead in his office, poisoned by a compound traced directly to the hospital's own research supply. They found Elias Rowe sitting quietly in the hallway, hands folded, waiting. He didn't run. He didn't resist. At trial, the truth came out. The cover-ups, the exploitation, the lies. Families wept. Careers collapsed. The hospital board resigned in disgrace. Elias was convicted, but the courtroom was silent. When the verdict was read, no cheers, no outrage, only the heavy understanding that justice had come, but at a terrible cost. As Elias was led away, Mara Klein noticed something chilling. He smiled, because the files he left behind weren't copies. They were originals, and somewhere outside the courtroom, beyond the headlines, another name was already being crossed off a list, because Elias Rowe didn't believe he was finished. He believed he was necessary, and the system that created him was still very much alive. They thought the story ended with a conviction. Headlines faded. Cameras moved on. Elias Rowe became a footnote, another broken man swallowed by the justice system. The hospital rebranded. New leadership, fresh slogans about transparency and care. Flowers bloomed where scandals once stood. But systems don't heal just because they change their names. They adapt. From his cell, Elias listened. News reports filtered in through static and gossip. Lawsuits quietly settled. Non-disclosure agreements signed. Families paid to forget. And the same research wing reopened under a different title. Innovation, progress, opportunity. Elias smiled less now, but his eyes stayed sharp. Mara Klein didn't stop. She followed the paper trail Elias had left behind. The originals that couldn't be denied. What she found disturbed her more than Hale ever had. Hale wasn't an exception. He was a model. Other hospitals, other cities, the same numbers, the same patterns. Patients without advocates, communities without power, trials disguised as treatment, deaths labeled unavoidable. When Mara tried to publish, editors hesitated, advertisers complained, legal departments warned her off. She was told to wait, to soften the language, to be careful. Careful was how people died. Then a letter arrived at her apartment. No return address, handwritten, precise. You're looking in the right direction. Don't stop now. Inside was a list of names, not victims, administrators, consultants, board members. Mara's hands shook because some of those names were still active, and one of them had just announced a nationwide expansion. Meanwhile, inside the prison, Elias watched men like him cycle through. Poor, forgotten, disposable, he listened to their stories and heard echoes of his own. The guards called him quiet, model inmate, invisible again. What they didn't see was the way people sought him out. Questions, advice, how to file complaints, how to document abuse, how to make truth hard to bury. Elias never told them what to do. He only taught them how systems think. Outside, something began to change. Small at first, a nurse leaked emails. A junior accountant copied files. A whistleblower hotline flooded overnight. The public called it coincidence. Mara called it momentum. Then came the hearing, televised, unavoidable. A senator demanded answers. Executives sweated under lights. Charts appeared on screens. The numbers told a story no one could interrupt. Someone asked where the information came from. Mara didn't say his name. That night, Elias sat on his bunk as alarms echoed down the corridor. Another lockdown, another fight, another reminder of how violence thrived where neglect ruled. He closed his eyes and breathed. He hadn't saved everyone. He knew that now, but he had changed the math. In a quiet office miles away, a boardroom vote was delayed. A trial was canceled. A program paused pending review. For the first time, power hesitated. Justice didn't arrive with sirens. It arrived with fear. Fear of exposure. Weeks later, another letter reached Mara. Shorter this time. You're not alone. You never were. She looked at the postmark, a prison town. When she visited Elias, the glass between them felt thinner than before. They'll replace the names, she said. They always do. Elias nodded. Then replace the light. She frowned. Make it harder for shadows, he said. As she left, a guard watched him carefully. Something had changed in the way people looked at Elias Rowe. Not respect, not fear, but recognition. That night, the news broke. A major healthcare conglomerate announced a sweeping investigation after new. Information surfaced. Stock prices dropped. Executives resigned. The anchor called it accountability. Elias called it a beginning. That night, the news broke. A major healthcare conglomerate announced a sweeping investigation after new. Information surfaced. Stock prices dropped. Executives resigned. The anchor called it accountability. Elias called it a beginning. In the final moments before lights out, he heard a whisper through the bars from a man 2 cells down. They say someone on the outside is still crossing names off lists. Elias lay back, staring at the ceiling. He thought of Lily, of his mother, of all the people whose stories ended without witnesses. The system that created him was still alive, but now it knew it was being watched, and somewhere beyond the walls. The question wasn't whether Elias Rowe was finished. It was whether the world was ready for what came after him, because justice had learned to walk, and it wasn't done yet.